In the late 60s, the arms race between the high-altitude strategic bomber and the interceptor got a little weird. The United States had started work on a high-altitude supersonic nuclear strategic bomber, and the Soviet Union needed something to counter this. It was estimated that the bomber would be operational within 10 years, so the Soviets didn't have a lot of time for doing research and development. The engines were pulled off of a cruise missile project, and it was given a massive 600-watt upwards-looking radar system. It was designed for one thing, that is to get to altitude, fire 4 of the largest air-to-air missiles ever made, and then go home. The United States first caught wind of this in the late 60s when we got some spy satellite footage, and the shape of the wing being somewhat similar to the F-15 made us nervous. In 1970, the Soviets broadcast one of their air shows with English audio, specifically for the Western audience. This was when we got the first close-up look at the MiG-25, and we were very concerned by what we saw. The size of the engines and wings seemed to indicate that it was going to be an extremely fast, extremely agile fighter. The Soviets send a couple MiG-25s that have been modified for surveillance to Egypt, and some Israeli F-4 Phantoms attempt to intercept them, and that's when the West gets an idea of the raw speed that the MiG-25 can achieve. They seemed to be cruising at just below Mach 3, and when the intercept was attempted, they accelerated to approximately Mach 3.5. Eventually, a Soviet defector flew one to a civilian airport in Japan, and even though NATO tried their hardest to keep the airplane, Japan has to live next to the Soviet Union, so they gave it back, but not before the United States had taken a look at it. According to the Soviets, when it was returned, every single surface had a hole drilled in it, apparently for metallurgical testing. And this is when we discovered that this aircraft was not made out of lightweight aluminum and titanium, it was made entirely out of stainless steel. So this monstrous speed that we'd been so concerned about could only be accomplished in a straight line. We also learned from interviewing the pilot that if the plane ever exceeded Mach 3, the engine would have to be replaced immediately, and each engine was only rated for about 150 hours of flying, so they literally had to be replaced every month. Additionally, the radar was only upward-looking, so the United States had already scrubbed the Valkyrie program, but they started focusing from that point forward on lower-altitude bombers that are capable of avoiding radar. But because we were so terrified of the Foxbat before we actually got our hands on one, the F-15 ended up being finished early and having a lot more abilities than it was originally intended to have. So if you've ever wondered how the Air Force went straight from the F-4 to something as capable as the F-15, it was a mistake.